The 2022 South African Rally Raid Championship resumed recently with the inaugural Team Hilux Rally Raid 400 in Bronkhorstspruit. The route may have been familiar, but the race had an all-new name thanks to its eponymous title sponsor. All the dusty and gutsy action from Bronkies is proudly brought to you by Toyota, Ford, Gulfstream and Pirelli. The town of Bronkhorstspruit lies in the Gauteng province, and midwinter it can't be accused of being beautiful. With that said, the farmers who generously allowed the SARRC to use their land were more than accommodating, and on the weekend of the 19th and 20th of August 2022, the Team Hilux Rally Raid Bronkhorstspruit got underway. But before we get into the details of the race, let's take a quick look at the championship standings after 2 rounds of the 2022 SARRC. The names of 2 men stood out after the first 2 rounds. In the special vehicle category, it was that of Tim Howes who topped the standings, whilst TGRSA's Shamir Variawa was in the lead in the production category. But beyond the overall categories, there are also a multitude of classes to consider. Starting with the special vehicles, it was Timmy Howes ahead of Trace Price-Moore, with Lourdes de Prieur in 3rd place in Class A. Class B had just 2 runners, with Quinton Lessing ahead of Keith McInerney. Werner Mostert had the lead in the Class Gs, followed by Jeff Minott and Glenn Turon. Over in the production category, it was the youngster Jaden Els topping the Class T charts, with Christo Rose in 2nd and Johan van Staden in 3rd place. Class T 1.2 had Brian Baragwanath heading the standings, with Lance Drathui in 2nd and Yannick Panagiotis rounding out the top 3. Class T1 had become a busy place, with no fewer than 15 names appearing in the standings, though we're just going to look at the top 10. 3rd place in the highly competitive class belonged to Philip Huerta, whilst veteran Gary Berthold found himself in 2nd place. Eben Besson, who can still be called a rookie, was in the lead after 2 rounds. And finally, onto the big boys in Class T1+, where it was an all TGRSA affair at the top of the standings. Janelle de Villiers edging ahead of overall production leader Shamir Variawa, with Guy Bottrell in 3rd. So that's how the numbers stacked up after the opening 2 rounds of the season, but over in Bronkhorstspruit, the crews were getting ready to take on the Pirelli qualifying race. A short, sharp route of only 15 kilometers, which would be used to determine the starting order for the main event. We caught up with some of the key players before they set off. Eben Besson has made a massive step up in his rally raid career, both in terms of his car and his team. As a member of the hosting Team Hilux Rally Raid squad, the businessman was sure to feel some pressure here at Bronkies, especially given the fact that he was leading the Class T1 Championship coming into the event.
Yeah, a little bit of nerve-wracking. It's first time racing here. Last year there was no event. The year before I wasn't racing, so my first time, so looking forward.
Also in Class T1+, TGRSA Shamir Variawa was the man ruling the production category roost after 2 rounds, and the former champion seemed pragmatic about his approach to the upcoming event.
Yeah, we just, I try not to think about it. I'm just going to give every race my best, and at the end of it, the best man will win.
He had teammate Janelle de Villiers for company at the top of the standings. The man from Stellenbosch has won many championships in a variety of formulae, and even has a Dakar win to his name. The experienced driver was also ready for the upcoming battle.
Yeah, new race. We haven't been here for a couple of years, but we always know this race is quite fast, very dusty.
And as ever, the boys in red would have the boys in blue to contend with. And as Gareth Woolridge explains, they were hopeful for a good result in Bronkies given their upgrades to their Ford Rangers.
Some problems with our boost and things like that, so we've rectified that all, and on top of it done upgrades, so you're very excited to fight.
In Class T, it was the SARRC's youngest competitor, 18-year-old Jaden Els, who was in the lead of the title chase. The King Price Extreme and Universal Kitchens driver was realistic about the upcoming event, but he certainly wasn't going to be holding back.
We're just going to go for it and give it our all this weekend.
We also caught up with the Special Vehicle Championship leader, Timmy Howes, who was keen to take back the crown that he lost to Lance Drathui just 1 year ago.
We just got to keep it pinned and keep it safe and get to the end.
And talking of taking back crowns, Werner Mostert has seen it all in Class G, from the highs of winning the title to the lows of seeing it all slip away at the end of the season. At this point, however, the Can-Am Maverick driver was still in control of the title chase.
Yes, I think we got a nice lead at the moment, but we got to look after it, so the pressure is on.
Over in Class T 1.2, where the Century CR6 two-wheel drive cars compete, it came as no surprise that Brian Baragwanath was the main man in charge of the two events.
Yeah, we're excited to be here with a new turbo engine in the CR6. There's been a lot of development, a lot of money thrown in it. We hope we can make it count.
And finally, we caught up with visiting international star driver Matteo Sarradori, who campaigns in a Century CR6 on the international stage.
First race with the Century Racing for prepare Dakar and a new car for the next Dakar.
The Team Hilux Rally Raid featured a qualifying race sponsored by Pirelli to determine the starting order for the main event. This qualifier took place over a distance of only 15 kilometers and was followed by the first of 3 racing loops, an 80-kilometer test held on the Friday of the race weekend, with the remaining loops following on the Saturday. And at 12 noon on Friday the 19th of August, it was go time in Bronkhorst, as the 40 crews took to the starters' orders and set off on the Pirelli qualifying race. But things didn't quite go to plan, as choking thick dust saw a number of competitors finding themselves adrift of the route. The purpose of the Pirelli qualifying race is to offer all of the competitors a level playing field in order to set their best times. But in this circumstance, this was clearly not the case.
Really difficult morning. Luckily they took out the prologue, because otherwise we would have been in a bit of trouble looking at all the dust in there.
As Larachan mentioned, the organisers decided to cancel the qualifying race results, relying instead on the drivers' seedings to determine their starting order positions. The top 10 seeded drivers were given the opportunity to draw for their start positions, giving Shamir Variawa and Donnie Stassen the dubious honour of opening the road for the Team Hilux Rally Raid in Bronkhorstspruit. The opening loop covered a distance of 80 kilometres of varied terrain. The current production category championship leader had a tough time early on in the route, wrong-slotting on multiple occasions. As a result, Gareth Woolridge and Boyd Dreyer in the NWM Ford Castrol T1 Plus Ranger passed the TGRSA crew on the stage, opening the road for the remainder of the first racing loop. But despite this, the Ford crew posted the third fastest time on the opening race loop, with TGRSA's Guy Bottrell and co-driver Simon Vasey-Lyle 6 seconds back in 4th place. The Horn brothers rounded out the top 5, finishing just shy of 2 minutes behind the winners. In the end, the fastest crew through the initial loop was the Class T1 Plus DKR Hilux of Henk Larachan and Brett Cummings. The pair posted a time of 59 minutes and 7 seconds over the stage, beating teammates Janelle de Villiers and Dennis Murphy by 53 seconds.
It's very tricky navigating here because there's no real road to follow, so you're sort of following your nose or following the GPS or looking for stickers.
No fewer than 7 Class T 1.2 CR6 cars started the opening racing loop, making for entertaining racing. This included French star driver Matteo Sarradori and co-driver Loic Monodier, who went second fastest in their class in their Century racing machine. They were bested by Ernst Roberts and Henry Kerner in the JCP Steel Supplies CR6, who posted a time of 1 hour, 2 minutes, 6 seconds to take the win. Third place belonged to the father and son pairing of Malcolm and Franz Koch, also in a JCP Steel Supplies CR6. In Class T1, the honours of opening the day went to Chris Visser and Albertus Blickies Venter, who set a time of 1 hour, 1 minute and 35 seconds in the Redline Revo, good enough for 6th place overall in the production category. They were followed home by Daniel Schroeder and Ryan Bland in their Nissan Navara, with Irben Besson and Leander Pinar rounding out the Class T1 podium in their Team Hilux Toyota. Over in Class T, championship leader Jaden Alls broke a front side shaft on his King Price Extreme Renault Duster, dropping him down the order. Fastest in the class was Christo Rose and co-driver Arno Olivier in their NWM Ford Ranger. Johan van Staden and son Sean were next fastest in their KEC Racing Renault Duster. This left Els and co-driver Armand de Toy in 3rd place in class. In the special vehicle category, former champions Timmy Howes and co-driver Gary Campbell were the odds-on favourites to win on the opening race loop of the Team Hilux Rally Raid Bronkhorstspruit. But the pair managed only the second fastest time in their BAT Spec 4. They were bested by Lourt de Prier and Chris Visser Jr. driving the A99 Farmers Meat Striker. Keith McInerney and brother Andrew posted the third fastest time in their BAT Macmobile, rounding out the Class A podium. There was trouble for Sandra Labiskakny-Jonk and husband Jaco Jonk, who struggled with brake problem issues throughout the opening loop, going fourth fastest in their KEC BAT Viper. Class G saw Jeff Minott and co-driver Gerrit Snyman power their hydropower equipment Can-Am to first place on the day, whilst former champions Cecil and Aladis Lani recorded the second fastest time. Third place went to Peter Walter and co-driver Pierre Jourdan in their Can-Am Maverick. The big news in Class G was that former champion Werner Mostert and son Ian were penalised for overspeeding in a controlled zone, dropping them down the order. A similar fate befell Francois de Witt and Ewald van Rensburg. Class P had Guy Henley and co-driver Brian Schwim reap the rewards in the P51 CR2 with Quinton Lessing and Noel Acton going second fastest in their CRT. And that was that for the opening day of the 2022 Team Hilux Rally Raid in Bronkhorstspruit. As the dust settled and the shadows drew long, there were plenty of crews with a lot to think about prior to day number 2. But there were a few guys and girls who had a lot of reasons to smile too. Let's take a look at the standings after loop number 1. The big boys in Class T1 Plus had Larachan and Cummings in the lead, followed by teammates De Villiers and Murphy, with the Ford duo of Woolridge and Dreyer in third. Class T1 had Visser and Fenter at the top of the standings, with Schroeder and Bland in second and Besson and Pinar in third. The gap from first to third was less than 30 seconds, making for a tasty battle indeed. In T1.2, it was Roberts and Kerner setting the pace, with visitors Saradori and Menordier in second, just 29 seconds behind. The Koch family in third, showing great pace to stay only 1 minute and 5 seconds behind the leaders. Finally, in production category Class T saw Rose and Olivier in the lead, with a comfortable gap to the Van Stadens in second place. Els and de Toy had a lot of work to do, having lost 6 minutes and 33 seconds in the opening loop. In Special Class A, we had de Prier and Visser leading by 1 minute and 18 seconds, with Howes and Campbell in second. The McInernys were in third place, 2 minutes, 32 seconds off the lead. Class B had Henley and Schwim ahead of Lessing and Acton by nearly 4 minutes, whilst in Class G we saw Minott and Snyman best the Lani brothers by 1 minute and 57 seconds. Peter Walter and Jourdan were in third, 5 minutes 8 seconds behind the leaders. Day 1 of the 2022 Team Hilux Rally Raid in Bronchi certainly brought a lot of adrenaline, dust and surprises. But the race had barely begun, so join us after the break as we bring you all the action from the Saturday of the race weekend, with 2 more action-packed race loops and plenty of dust. Welcome back to the outskirts of Bronkhorstspruit for the second half of the Team Hilux Rally Raid Round 3 in the South African Rally Raid Championship. On the cards for the Saturday event, 2 identical racing loops throughout the farmlands and surrounding areas to the southeast of Bronchies. Each loop would consist of around 160 kilometers, and with a mix of fast and flowing sections combined with slower and more technical parts, the crews were facing a real challenge. As the leaders of the race, Henk Larachan and Brett Cummings had the honour, or in this case, rather the burden of being the first car to tackle racing loop number 1. At exactly 8 AM on the Saturday, Larachan dropped the clutch in his Toyota Gazoo Racing SA Hilux to get the race underway. 2 minutes later, he was followed by teammates Chanel de Villiers and Dennis Murphy in an identical Hilux. The NWM Ford Castrol Ranger crew of Gareth Woolridge and Boyd Dreyer had every intention to try and close the gap to the leading Toyotas. But the Ford was the piece of meat in the Toyota sandwich, because just 2 minutes after the Ranger, a third Toyota Gazoo Racing SA Hilux started its race, with Guy Bottrell and Simon Vasey-Lyle behind its wheel, and yet another Hilux. But this one belonging to the Team Hilux Rally Raid squad of brothers Johan and Werner Horn. These were all the cars in the new for 2022 Premier class called the T1 Plus. Behind them, the next batch of fast drivers started their race. The first being multiple champion Chris Visser and co-driver Blikkies Venter, now behind the wheel of a red-lined Revo. They were followed by German driver Daniel Schroeder and Ryan Bland in their Nissan Navara, and the rising star pairing of Eben Besson and Leander Pienaar in the Team Hilux Toyota. We'll get back to how it all ended for the guys in the faster classes, but do take into consideration that South Africa has one of the best rally raid championships on the entire planet, with a variety of cars driven by an even larger variety of very talented drivers. Some do it just for the fun and the adventure, but most are pretty serious, and a few have aspirations to make it all the way to the very top. One crew with such aspirations is youngster Jaden Els with co-driver Armand de Toy. The young man started the final day of the Bronkhorstspruit 400 third and effectively last in Class T, but the King Price Extreme Renault Duster driver quickly found his rhythm and reeled in the competition, one by one. The youngster had lots to smile about at the finish line.
Today was worth it. A lot of dust, but nice roads, kept it clean and got it to the end.
There were no less than 6 crews that started the race in the highly competitive, yet relatively affordable Class G for the side-by-side race cars. And although it was far from plain sailing, all 6 managed to reach the finish line. Championship leaders Werner and Ian Mostert were on course for a much better result, but the father and son pairing received a 10-minute penalty for speeding in a decontrolled zone on the Friday, and 10 minutes was more than enough to drop them down from first place onto the final step of the podium. The dice at the front of the Class G field got pretty close, as Peter Walter and Pierre Jourdan only beat the Mosterts by around 2 minutes to claim their first second-place finish of the season. A great result for the crew. In fact, the top 3 crews in Class G were covered by less than 5 minutes. With Walter and Mostert crossing the line in second and third respectively. There could be only one winner though, and on this occasion it went down to Jeff Minott and his co-driver Gerrit Snyman in their hydropower equipment Can-Am Maverick.
You know, the best thing that happened to me in off-road racing was getting hold of Jerry, and we make such a great team in the car.
If thunder from big and powerful V8 engines, sideways action and plenty of dust is what you are looking for, then look no further than the big-wheeled rear-wheel drive machines that compete in Class A of the special vehicle category. The McInerney brothers, Keith and Andrew, have become household names in the rally raid fraternity, but the pairing failed to reach the Bronkhorstspruit finish line this time. And unfortunately for Sandra Labuskakny-Jonk, so did she. The popular lady driver, with husband Jaco reading the notes alongside her, were in the mix when their Bat Viper broke a lower control arm midway through the final day, turning the husband and wife into spectators for the rest of the day. So the battle for Class A supremacy ended up as a fight between former champions Tim Howes and Gary Campbell and Louis Duprier and Chris Visser Jr. Farmers Meat striker of Duprier was in fact leading the race at the start of the day after a successful Friday, but the crew got stuck for more than an hour late in the first of Saturday's racing loops. This was just what Tim Howes and Gary Campbell needed to take control of the race, and after clocking a total time of 5 hours and 47 minutes, the pair were declared the winners of the Class A battle. The stopwatch, however, did not tell the full story.
Thanks must go to Sandra and Jaco Jonk. They lent us a spare steering rack and sweet valve, so without them we wouldn't be standing here.
After 2 long days of cold, wind and dust, this was the reward. Not only the sweet taste of winner's bubbly, but the chance to spray it from the winner's podium here at the Team Hilux Rally Raid in Bronkhorstspruit. And here is confirmation once and all after the times were added up. A popular victory for Minott and Snyman over Walter and Jourdan in Class G, with the Mosterts rounding out the podium. Howes and Campbell emerged victorious in Class A over Duprier and Visser Jr. The guys and girls in the SARRC race cars competing in the newly formed Class T 1.2 certainly had aspirations to fight for overall victory, like Brian Baragwanath has done on a few occasions, but here in Bronkhorstspruit it wasn't to be. BB would have been eager to stretch the legs of his new turbo power plant in his Century CR6, but a puncher, a wrong turn or two, and a broken gear link bracket put an end to his aspirations. And what a story this was. Simon Murray arrived in Bronkhorstspruit with the most interesting looking Toyota Hilux built by Stuart Thompson and the guys at WCT Engineering. With rally stalwart Megan Verlark reading the notes, the pair did extremely well to finish in the mix and in between the Century CR6s. This was only the second time out in the CR6 for Freiburg businessman Malcolm Koch and his son France in the navigator's seat. They completed the race in a fine 4th position. 1 minute and 7 seconds, that's all that separated the Kochs in 4th and the final podium position. On this occasion, that spot belonged to none other than the big dog, Lance Trethui, and new co-driver, Leonard Kramer, in the King Price Extreme CR6. So the battle for class honours was a war between Frenchman Matteo Sarradori and local lad Ernst Roberts. We doubt that the Frenchman has ever seen burnt mealie fields the way that we see them in Bronchies, but nonetheless, the Dakar star showed his mettle by fighting to the finish and claiming a brilliant second place in the process. Just 1 minute and 22 seconds from Ernst Roberts and Henry Kerner, who claimed their first victory since acquiring the CR6 and moving into this hotly contested class. And speaking of class, it was a classy drive from Roberts.
No, I'm ecstatic. No, believe me, it wasn't easy. Let me tell you, Sarradori is super fast. He's so smooth.
And on to Class T1 we go. And wow, what a busy place this was, with a variety of cars and brands, with some of the most talented drivers in the country, all battling for glory. Philip Puerta maintained his 100% finishing ratio since taking up the sport with another fine 6th place finish in his Redline machine. And a welcome return to the top 5 for young Richard Leek and Zahir Boudania, who missed the last few rounds due to other commitments. We were now nearing the sharp end of the field. Leek's time for nearly 400 kilometers was 5 hours and 39 minutes and 38 seconds, just 62 seconds slower than Scott Berger and Henk Janssen van Vuren in their King Price Extreme Mercedes-Benz. This was by far Berger's best outing to date in this competitive class. But that elusive podium still awaits Berger, who missed out to the very consistent Daniel Schroeder and Ryan Bland in their Nissan Navara. The German clearly likes sunny South Africa and is getting faster and faster with every outing. Fast enough for 3rd on this occasion. Up front, the pace was as hot as ever, and the Class T1 winner was either going to be the wily old fox Chris Visser or the young challenger, Eben Besson. Visser and Albertus Venter had a slight lead earlier in the day in their Redline Revo, but the Team Hilux driver Besson and co-driver Leander Pienaar were breathing down their necks. This is only Besson's 2nd year in the sport, and the dice between himself and former champion Visser was a sure highlight of the event. In the end, Visser had no choice but to surrender the lead to the flying Besson. Something called the sponsor's curse normally dictates that a sponsor rarely wins its own event, but on this day, the Team Hilux man proved it wrong.
We managed to get it right, and we didn't get a clean run, no punches at all at anything, so it was good for us. We're proud of that, and we're happy.
Oh yes, and that's how it ended in Class T1 that used to be the Premier class, but for 2022, the Premier class consists of these big-wheeled four-wheel drive monsters and the age-old fight between Ford and Toyota. On this occasion, it didn't happen as Ford's Lance Woolridge and Alvin Vonk were forced to the sidelines with a technical niggle. TGRSA's Shamir Varioa and Donnie Stassen were leading in the title fight going into this round, but the pairing lost their way, drove on the wrong route and received a penalty that dropped them way down the order. Gareth Woolridge and Boyd Dreyer were as always up to the task and willing to take the fight to the Toyotas, but an overheating differential in the NWM Ford Castrol Team Ranger halted their progress and relegated them down to 5th place. Multiple SA Rally champions Guy Bottrell and Simon Vasey-Lyle are still learning after adding the sport of Rally Raid to their motorsport schedule. But Bottrell is a fast learner, and a solid 4th place finish in Class T1 Plus means more valuable experience for the Italians. All that remained was to award the final podium positions and award an overall race winner. Sounds easy, but in the sport of Rally Raid, nothing is easy. Just ask guys like Johan Horn, Henk Ladergan and Janelle de Villiers. And these were the 3 drivers behind the wheels of the 3 Hiluxes, battling it out for the overall victory. This was only the Horn brothers' second ever race in the new big-wheeled Team Hilux Toyota, and they made it count. Their team put up a great show as the event sponsors, and the Horns did their part to place their new steed firmly on the podium. So this left us with a race between Toyota Gazoo Racing SA teammates Henk Ladergan and Brett Cummings, and Janelle de Villiers and Dennis Murphy. And what a show they put on for the thousands of fans that braved the cold and dust on that particular winter's morning. Ladergan started the day with a 53-second advantage over his famous teammate, but the old man de Villiers fought back to close the gap, only for Ladergan to extend it once again. After a roller coaster of a ride, it was Ladergan who stopped the clock with a total time just 21 seconds faster than that of de Villiers. Absolutely amazing. And here it is, proof of Ladergan's 21-second victory over teammate de Villiers, with the Horn brothers rounding out the Class T1 Plus podium. Victory for Ernst Roberts over Frenchman Matteo Serradori and Italian Lance Trathui in the Class T1.2, and a special victory for Eben Besson in the Class T1s on his sponsor's own event, with Chris Visser and Daniel Schroeder rounding out the Class T1 podium. Youngster Jaden Els claimed Class T ahead of the Van Stardens and Christo Rose. Bubbly, championship points and the sheer ecstasy of victory. Let's hear from the men who stood on the top steps of the podium.
It was a clean run, the car ran really well, Brett did a great job in finding the road, really happy with the day.
Next up on the 2022 South African Rally Raid Championship calendar, we have rounds 4 and 5, both happening on the same weekend and at the same venue. The famous Nampo Showgrounds near the Free State town of Bothaville will host these battles on the 30th of September and the 1st of October. All the slip sliding action was brought to you by Ford, Toyota, Gulfstream and Pirelli.